Have you been grinding your ass off for the BMD-4 and want to know whether it's been worth it? Well, I can confirm at the very start of this video that this tank is a cracker. Alright lads, whether you're a new subscriber or a long time viewer of the channel, thank you very much for stopping by today. The BMD-4 is one of the newest tanks available in War Thunder, only unlockable in this year's summer landing event. To get the BMD-4, you have to get 10 tanker stars, which as I'm sure you guys know, is no easy feat. But what about the BMD-4 itself? Well, this is a rank 6 Soviet light tank, located at battle rating 8.7 in realistic battles. We've already covered how you unlock the tank, but it is also worth noting that this is an event vehicle, not a premium, so you will not have additional modifiers to the Silver Lion and RP gain on this tank. Also, because it's an event vehicle, you will not have that cheap crew training. To put the BMD-4 in your lineup is going to set you back 200,000 Silver Lions. The vehicle will also come stock, meaning you will have to unlock all of its modifications. This means you'll have to grind out over 270,000 RP points while using this vehicle. To make that grind a little easier, I'd highly suggest buying the Expert and Age qualifications for the cost of 690,000 Silver Lions and 2,100 Golden Eagles respectively. One good thing about event vehicles is they typically have a cheaper repair cost compared to other tech tree vehicles, and it's no different with the BMD-4. When fully upgraded and playing realistic battles, it will cost you 3,963 Silver Lions to repair. But what about the rewards? Well, in realistic battles with a premium account, you can expect an RP modifier of 452% and a Silver Line modifier of 210%. In terms of customization, you do have a lot of camouflage available to purchase for Golden Eagles, including the good old Soviet late green camo. In this video we're going to cover the mobility, armour and firepower of this tank before finishing with a conclusion. If you do enjoy this video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. Alright, moving on to the engine and mobility. And to start off, a little bit of context on what the BMD actually is. The BMD is essentially the Parachute Regiment's version of the BMP-3. They got rid of the ability to carry troops inside, and basically turned it into a dedicated infantry fighting vehicle. Well, I guess minus the infantry. This means that the tank is much lighter, but uses the same horsepower engine. This engine produces 450 horsepower, but combined with the insanely low weight of 13.6 tons, it gives you a massive power to weight ratio of 33.1 horsepower per ton. And that's in realistic, not in arcade. This is by far probably the highest power to weight ratio I've seen in War Thunder. This thing moves faster than Trotsky did when he found out Stalin took power. It truly is one of the fastest accelerating tanks in War Thunder. With this insane power to weight ratio, you can easily get up to a top speed of 70 km per hour, both forwards and reverse. Due to using the same engine and transmission as found in the BMP-3, you can go as fast forwards as you can in reverse. This means not only do you have a great power to weight ratio, but you can reach that top speed insanely quickly as well. Both of these factors combine to make you one of the most mobile tanks in War Thunder. Surprisingly for a Russian vehicle, but common on most of the BMD series, you do have neutral steering in this tank, which allows you to turn on the spot. And that pretty much covers it for the mobility of the BMD-4, but I have to say lads, this is probably one of the favourite things about this tank. It's just so damn fast. It's almost as good as the EBRs are. You can seriously get from one side of the map to the other in an insanely short amount of time, which usually catches the enemies off guard. Honestly, the only real downside I can think of with this vehicle is due to the BMD being a Parachute Regiment vehicle, it would have been good to have an Earthborn. We then move on to the armour and survivability of the BMD-4, and to start, this tank has a crew of 3 men, with 1 driver in the hull and a commander and gunner in the turret. As you can tell from the way that this vehicle looks, it's not the most well armoured tank in the game. It's also pretty small, which means its internal components are rather squished together, and the crew is no different. The driver, gunner and commander are located relatively close together, which increases the likelihood that a single shot will knock out all 3 at once. We also have the ammunition rack stored pretty much next to the driver and gunner. Again, meaning taking a round in this general location will not only kill your crew, but is also likely to start an ammunition fire, again instantly killing the vehicle. One of the good things about having minimal armour is that APFSDS rounds typically won't do that much damage, as there isn't enough armour there to create shrapnel. However, the same cannot be said for high explosive and high explosive anti-tank fin stabilised rounds, which will hull break this vehicle. We're going on to the amp performance itself, and to test this, we're going to be using the 35mm gun found on the Gepard. We'll be using the default armour-piercing incendiary rounds at a range of 200 meters. Starting as always, the wall frontal plate provides around 33mm of armour, which drops down to 25mm armour as you move slightly up. If we go to the upper frontal plate, armour drops down again to around 19 to 20mm of armour, depending on the angling. As I said, this armour protection isn't great, but what can you expect really? This tank is designed to be pushed out the back of airplanes for God's sake. Moving up to the turret, and the karma is actually slightly better here, but still it's not going to save you. Around 30mm, and in some parts of the gun breach it does pop up to around 40mm. But again, it doesn't offer you really any protection. Turning to the camera to the side of the vehicle and things are no better really. Armour protection drops down to around 4mm at the very rear of the vehicle, and does double to around 8mm of armour around the crew compartment. But again, I don't think most vehicles in the game, even at rank 1, are going to struggle to penetrate that. So you will be highly vulnerable to all guns on the battlefield, so be very wary around Japanese and American tanks which have that 50 caliber machine gun on top, and some coaxially mounted rifle caliber machine guns might pose a threat to you, at least if you side onto them. Moving up to the turret, and again we have the same 8mm of armour, so again, you're very vulnerable pretty much everywhere you are. To conclude, the BMD-4 is a very vulnerable tank, at least when the enemy can see you. As you can imagine, as we covered in the last segment, this vehicle is insanely fast on pretty much all terrains, whether it's sand, snow or soft ground. So the key to doing well in this tank is just to not get seen in general, to be honest. You really can use that speed and manoeuvrability to get into places where the enemy just will not expect you to be. There are a few downsides which we'll cover in the next segment, but I truly believe that this is one of the most survivable vehicles in War Thunder. Not because it's designed to take hits, but you can just avoid taking fire in general, as long as you play with your brain. But seeing as this is War Thunder, we can safely say that most players do not have a brain. Alright, moving on to the best part of all my reviews, the firepower. And the BMD-4 actually has two main weapons. Up first, we have the 30mm 2A72 cannon. This is the same gun that's found on pretty much all the other BMP variants in the game. However, the 2A72 variant does have a slightly lower fire rate, at least compared to the BMP2. You can carry 500 rounds in total, with two 250 round belts. You have a fire rate of 330 shots per minute, which means you have a continuous fire rate of over 1.5 minutes. This is very good and will pretty much last you an entire game. I have yet to run out of ammunition during my around 20 games in battle. One downside that I will say about the BMD, it's got rather limited vertical guidance. While it does have very good 60 degrees of gun elevation, it has a rather average 6 degrees of gun depression. As I've mentioned several times now in this review, I've used the BMD-4 to be a fast flanker. When I was flanking, I tried to use hills to cover myself, but I found that the poor gun depression meant that I wasn't able to fire on many enemies. This led to me having to go up over the hill, exposing myself to fire. While this isn't a major issue, it is still something that I think is a weak spot of this tank. We then have the big boy of the BMD-4. This is the 100mm 2A70 cannon. This is the same missile launcher that is found on the BMP3, but this features an autoloader, which automatically loads both the missiles and the high explosive round launcher. This gives you a constant reload of 5 seconds, whether it's a missile or a high explosive round. This is a big advantage compared to the BMP3, which you could fire a missile once every 30 seconds, but with the BMD-4, you can fire every 5 seconds. You can carry 38 rounds of high explosive ammunition, alongside 4 missiles. Before we cover the ammunition, I'd like to point out that this vehicle has a laser rangefinder, as well as night vision and thermal optics, with those thermal optics being high resolution. This is very good, especially for the Soviet tech tree, which really only gets high class thermals at top tier. The BMD-4 at battle rating 8.7, as well as having high resolution thermals, is a big boost to the battle rating 8.7 Soviet lineup. Well, moving on to the ammunition, the thing that does all the work in these tanks, and we'll start with the 30mm rounds. And there isn't really any competition here, everyone's going to be using the APDS belt. This belt consists of 4 saber rounds and a single armor piercing round. These penetrate 82mm of armor, and when you fire 330 of these bad boys a minute, you are sure to rip apart enemy tanks. You can easily kill the Leopard L-44s from the front with this thing, as long as you aim for the turret ring. And while most tanks from the front won't be able to be destroyed, you can certainly rip out the sides and rear of every tank in the game. Well, moving on to the 100mm cannon, and up first we have the 3OF32 round. This is your stock high explosive shell. It travels at 250 meters per second and contains 2.6 kilos of TNT. This gives it 31mm of explosive penetration. This isn't amazing, but can be used to hull break light vehicles, such as the Radkampfwagen and Class 3P. Up next, we have the 3OF70. This is similar to the previous round, but is different in many ways. The first difference is a muzzle velocity. Whereas the last round had 250 meters per second, the F70 has 355 meters per second. This makes it much faster, which in turn means it much easier to aim, It also contains much more TNT filler, increasing from 2.6 kilos up to 3.54 kilograms. Again, this gives it more explosive penetration, up to 36mm. While this is only a 5mm difference in explosive penetration, that extra TNT does a lot more damage, especially to lightly armoured vehicles. Again, this thing can easily be used to hit roofs of vehicles, and instantly hull break in lighter tanks, such as Dardos, Class 3Ps, Radkampfwagen 90s, and several M3 Bradley variants. And we now move on to the missiles. Up first we have the 9M117. This travels at 370 meters per second and has a max firing range of 4 kilometers. It contains a TNT warhead containing 4.62 kilograms of TNT and can penetrate 600mm of armor. This missile by itself is actually pretty good. There are very few missiles at battle rating 8.7 that can defeat this missile, especially considering it's mainly Soviet tanks that contain ERA. ERA, or explosive reactive armor, essentially prematurely detonates a missile, causing it to lose some of its effective penetration. In game, and just like real life, it's mainly the Soviet forces that use this, rather than NATO. But that isn't a matter, as a BMD-4 can also penetrate ERA, with the help of your next missile. This is the 9M117M1. This is a tandem charge warhead. It again travels at 370 meters per second and contains 4.62 kilograms of TNT. This missile is different as it can penetrate 750mm of armor. Not only can this missile penetrate ERA, has more penetration, but it also does a hell of a lot of post-penetration damage. You can kill most opponents in a single hit with this missile, as long as you get proper shot placement. Insta-killing Leopard L-44s with this thing has been very satisfying. Apart from the 38 and 100mm guns, you do have a rifle caliber coaxially mounted machine gun. And that pretty much covers it for the BMD-4's weaponry. Just like the BMP-3, I think the BMD-4 is incredibly well armed. You have that 30mm cannon which can rip opponents apart easily, especially with that APDS belt. And the 100mm cannon is also very flexible. Once you've fired off your 4 ATGMs, which allow you to knock out both tanks and low-flying helicopters, you can switch to your high explosive rounds, which with 36mm of penetration, can pretty much hull break every light vehicle that you'll face at battle rating 8.7 and above. Don't forget, you also have a laser rangefinder, which means with the recent changes in War Thunder, you can easily snap to range with high explosive rounds, making them much more easy to use compared to previous updates. Before we get into the review, be sure to let me know down below what you guys think about the BMD-4, and which ship, tank or plane you guys would like to see reviewed next. Considering it certainly is one mammoth grind to unlock the BMD-4, I personally would say that it is definitely worth it. I will be redeeming my voucher for this vehicle, I will not be selling it on the market. Playing the BMD-4 this last few days has probably been the most fun I've had in War Thunder in ages, and that really is saying something. While I haven't had the best of games, I have had quite a few aces in the tank, but just being able to be so fast and just be such a little annoying bastard on the battlefield really did allow me to have some fun. The combination of the incredibly good mobility as well as the very powerful firepower does make the BMD-4 incredibly powerful on the battlefield. You can kill literally everything you'll meet. I've even used it in top tier games and it's still as effective there as it is at battle rating 8.7, mainly down to those incredibly powerful missiles, high resolution thermals, and that fast firing APDS firing 30mm cannon. While this is an event vehicle and will come to you stock, I'd say it is well worth the grind, both to unlock this tank and to spade it. I'd say that this certainly is one of the best event vehicles we've ever got in War Thunder. I'd say it's better than the Object 279, and it is a lot better than the Buccaneer. That thing's a piece of shit. Now, I can't tell you definitive whether you're going to like this tank, but for me, it's insanely good fun. I've played it quite a lot on stream, got over 50 kills in it, and feel pretty confident when I say this is one of the best rank 6 and one of the best battle rating 8.7 light tanks in the game. I'm not sure whether you guys will like it, but I can tell you 100% that I love this vehicle. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please do consider leaving a like and subscribing, lads.